So I'm going to get to the news now. There's a lot, actually, a lot of politics. But
Is it really?
First, I want to start in the Middle East, where Israel is reinforcing its ranks, despite some of the Obama administration's strongest criticism yet over fallout from its ongoing war with Hamas. Overnight, Israel announced plans to call up another 16,000 reserves, bringing the total number to roughly 86,000. The move follows a violent day of clashes that saw at least 15 Palestinians killed during shelling at a United Nations school serving as a shelter. Now, Israel says it did not target the school and was responding to Hamas attacks without specifically blaming Israel. The White House condemned the deadly attack. It is the 6th time a UN school was struck. A UN spokesman says Israel was told 17 times the school was serving as a shelter.
We will soon have a situation where tens of thousands of people, if they continue to leave their homes in the streets of Gaza without food, without water, without shelter, serious chances that communicable diseases will break out. This is beyond UNRWA. I'm afraid to say we've reached breaking point. It's time for the parties to this conflict to accept their responsibilities to the civilians caught up in this conflict.
A separate strike in Gaza left 11 members of one family dead, including 8 women and 2 children. Joining us now from Gaza, NBC News foreign correspondent Ayman Mohyeldin. Ayman?
Good morning, Mika. Just before you came to us, actually right behind me, about a mile or so down that road on the other side of the refugee camp, there was a strike. The smoke was just billowing. We're not yet sure what the intended target was, but right now we just heard it, we saw it, and we saw the smoke billowing as a result of it. But it gives you a sense that the operation here is still very much ongoing. There has been no lull in the fighting that has been taking place here. Israel has continued to carry out strikes throughout the course of the night and into the early morning, according to Palestinian sources, both health officials and Hamas's political wing. At the same time, that incident that happened yesterday, one that is drawing international condemnation from the United Nations and human rights experts, that attack at the UN school, who have now heard the Israeli response saying that there was fighting taking place in the vicinity of the school. The reaction from international human rights organizations and others is that that's simply not enough, that to say that there was fighting taking place in the vicinity of the school is not legitimate reason to target the school itself. But in addition to that, yesterday, also later in the afternoon, another very deadly incident taking place at the Shijaya market, one that killed at least 15 Palestinians that, again, Palestinian sources were blaming on Israeli shelling of the area, and according to witnesses there, was consistent with artillery fire. But so a very bloody day yesterday, and one that, as of now, seems to be very much in the same way, Mika.
Ayman, Joe Scarborough here. So you have the attacks, of course, on the UN schools, even after the United Nations warns Israel 17 times not to have the strikes there. There's not the ambiguity that there was at a previous attack that we all were talking about, where Israel gave 4 days of warning. And then in this crowded marketplace as well, a popular marketplace, another attack there. Is there any place, if I'm a father, and I've got young children, is there any place I can go in Gaza to protect my family?
Joe, the short answer to that is absolutely not. And we have documented this on more than one occasion. We have interviewed families, and in this case, fathers, who have taken their families out of neighborhoods that the Israelis told them to leave. They followed the Israeli military's instructions. They came into Gaza City, which is the more upscale city in Gaza Strip, home to 500,000 people. They thought that they would be safe. They took refuge in buildings that they're staying with relatives and family, sometimes up to 60 in a single apartment. They thought they would be safe, but it turned out that there was, in that apartment or in that apartment building or that apartment complex or on that street, a target that the Israelis wanted to target. Unbeknownst to them, the building was hit, and this one father lost his 2 children, his wife, his sister, his entire extended family. There are stories like that all over Gaza City. The short answer, Joe, is no.
And Ayman, that is a man, and I read your article, I saw your report, that's a man that did exactly what the Israelis wanted him to do. Exactly. He moved to the right place. He stayed out of the war zones. He did everything he could to protect his wife, and I think she's pregnant wife and family, and they were all killed in an airstrike. There is literally no place.
And
that go ahead, Ayman. I'm sorry.
And Joe, this was a guy who This was a guy who was educated. He not a member of any political faction here. He worked at a bank. He had traveled abroad. He had the option to go work abroad, but wanted to stay here in Gaza to be close to his extended family, raise his kids here despite the challenges. He really had hope for Gaza, but at the end of the day, he's now lost his entire family. And people will tell you, what does that mean for a future generation of Palestinians? How is all this trauma going to harden the beliefs of Palestinians who the international community constantly tries to nudge into reconciling and making peace with Israel when a father like this loses his family and now his own feelings are going to be challenged and hardened by all of this?
Eamon, it's Willie. As we pull the lens back a little bit and look wider at the Middle East, there's a front page piece in the New York Times this morning that talks about this coalition of Arab states, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, among others, that effectively have remained silent because they don't like Hamas either. And that's kind of viewed as de facto support of Israel. Do you see that playing out at all across the region?
Absolutely. And when you make the distinction, there's a difference between the Arab street and Arab regimes. There is still a tremendous amount of support for the Palestinian people on the Arab street. But over the course of the last several years, with what has happened in Egypt, the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and the rise of political Islamic parties across the region, there has been a backlash from some of these more autocratic regimes in the region against political Islamic organizations like Hamas and others. So as a result of that, they want to see Hamas as a political organization weaken. And so there is that de facto support for Israel. That doesn't mean they support the killing of Palestinians, but they definitely, in the eyes of some of the regimes, particularly in Egypt, which has always been a key broker among the Palestinian factions, now taking a step back, coming under criticism for not being that neutral or honest broker, if you will. Yes, there is that backlash against the political organization of Hamas from among the regimes. The irony of all of this, Willie, is that the Muslim world has been relatively quiet in terms of street protest in support of Palestinians in Gaza. The bigger demonstrations are happening all across Europe, and that's certainly an irony not lost on the people of Gaza here.
Eamon, thank you.
Thank you so much, Eamon. It's just incredible reporting by Eamon. Yeah. Nicole, let me ask you. I mean, we never talked about Israel before. I've always been like 100% supporter of Israel. The joke in Congress was anytime I wanted a key to the city of Tel Aviv, I could, get a gold-plated one. I'm sorry, this is asinine. This continued killing of women and children in a way that appears to be indiscriminate is asinine. It is bad. Of course, it's tragic for the Palestinian people. It is bad for the Israeli people. I mean, we will rue the day that this is happening every day and women and children are being seen, because you know what? As much as we all hate Hamas, what is going to replace Hamas is going to be much worse. It's going to be a radical Islamist group instead of just power-hungry, corrupt people that despise Israel. This is such a nightmare that is unfolding. And the biggest nightmare is that Hamas was on the run. The Arab states hate Hamas. And Israel has made them not only relevant again, but champions of the Palestinian people. This tragedy just keeps unfolding, and it keeps getting worse.
Well, I think the Israelis would quibble with the description of it as indiscriminate killing. I mean, they've been all over the airwaves articulating exactly what they do before a strike. But you're right.
Well, I mean, they blew up a popular marketplace yesterday. They blew up a UN school where there's 17 warnings. 17. That is indiscriminate. And you know what?
Right.
We share Israel's values a hell of a lot more than the people that they're bombing. But you know what? The United States of America, we cannot be associated with this if this continues. This is so bad, not only for the Israeli people, but for us.
And the article that Willie references is stunning to me. I mean, you've never, when President Bush was in office and violence erupted, as it often does in this part of the world, there was a whole lot of criticism. It was immediate, it was swift, and it was harsh on Israel from these nations, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE. Now, the disdain and the fear for Hamas and for the Muslim Brotherhood in the region exceeds all of the moral outrage about what they're seeing, what you described.
Well, and Mika, that is, again, the tragedy. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, a lot of other countries, Jordan, a lot of other Arab states, they want Israel to win in the struggle against Hamas, as do we. But there are better ways to do it than this.
Well, and also John Kerry's being dragged down in it as well for highlighting Hamas. I'm not sure exactly who's doing that. It seems if they keep going, they are.